It's 11:27 here on the Dr. Triana Show, News Radio 1580 WCCF, and we welcome your phone calls. Give us a call at 941-206-1580 or toll free at 888-441-1580. The lines are open. And now let's get back to the program. Here's Dr. Triana.
And my mother always reminds me to say, I'm accepting new patients. She always tells me, tell everybody. Anyways, for my phone number is 941-625-1990. If you want to have your hormones balanced and feel great and have better sex. So,
who would not want to have better sex?
I
right?
know. Who wouldn't want, right? I'm working on writing a book on that, too.
Ooh,
so.
That's got to be a bestseller.
Yes, it will be. We have Rob Kircher here talking about his wonderful television program, Great Neighborhood Cooks. And he has some interesting stories that he wants to tell us.
Well, yes, it's as you go along and we sort of evolve, if you will, you run into these amazing characters, and I call them characters in a very nice way. And I'll just give you a couple of samples here. One of the very first people that we actually shot for the show, and I can mention his name because he's already been on the show. His name is Joe Carson, and he has a significant other, Kathy Welt, and they are just a delight. Joe was a big corporate guy for most of his life. And when they retired, he decided that he was going to do something radically different. He just did not want to do the same old, same old. So he buys himself a food truck. And I said to Joe, I said, well, did you have any experience with owning a food truck? No. Do you know how to cook? No. Are you out of your mind? Yes. Okay. So, but the food truck, he decided was going to be something different. He wanted to do something very unique. So he decided that the type of food that he was going to prepare was going to be gourmet food.
Gourmet, okay.
Gourmet. So the average ticket price in a food truck is somewhere around $8 or $9. His was $28. And so he's from Boston, so he had this food truck in the Boston area. So most everything on his menu was seafood. He would do a lobster roll with 1.5 pounds of lobster, out of the higher price, right? He would do an amazing tuna ahi taco, which was out of sight. His New England clam chowder soup, chowder, you got to say chowder because he's from Boston, was amazing. So that's what this guy did. And he did it for 3 years. And it was very successful. But what he did, he would go to like the art shows or to high-end sporting events and so on and so forth where folks, for the most part, were a little more well-heeled, if you will, and could pay that kind of money for his food. But that's an example of one of the cooks that we've had on the show.
That's really interesting.
Yeah. In fact, he's going to be coming up this Sunday. So, folks, if you want to watch the show, it's tomorrow, it's Sunday, at 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's going to be on Fox 4, and that is WFTX TV. And we're actually devoting the entire episode to Joe and his partner, if you will, Kathy Welt, because of just the range of foods, the ones I just mentioned, that he's doing all of them. So we just decided to make one show run.
I'm hungry.
Oh, yeah.
Just to hear, I love lobster.
Yeah. And we have another, I just got to tell you about this other guy, if you don't mind.
No, I want to hear about it.
I'm just going to call him John and his wife Lori. And John was a former appliance salesman. Now, ready for this? Turned preacher, turned marriage counselor. Okay? And he is an amazing cook. So when I came to their house initially just to do my pre-production, he already had something prepared for me. And which I love because then I could really see where his head was. Well, we've all heard of cheesecakes before, right? Well, this was an amazing cheesecake. It was a larger one. Typically, they're in like an 8-inch spring pan. This was a 12-inch spring pan, so it was large. And he already had the crust in there. Now, most cheesecakes are done with some sort of a graham cracker crust. And it always tastes wonderful because of the graham cracker. But the problem with graham cracker is you bake it, and it caramelizes, it becomes very hard, and it's hard to get your knife through it. So I think we've all had the experience of, trying to cut a piece of cheesecake, and the top part is easy. It's getting through the crust, it's not. Well, he had a crust which reminded me very much of the crust my wife used to use for cheesecakes years before. It was made from Zwieback baby cookies.
Oh, I remember those. Yes.
Yeah. They were, if your child was teething, you'd give them one of these Zwieback. But it had this unique flavor to it. Well, I don't think they make those anymore. But he had a Goya product, and it was called Maria Cookie. And it tasted very similar to Zwieback. Oh. So that's what he had. He already had the spring pan. He already had the Zwieback base to it. And that's when I walked in. And he said, well, my cheesecake is a little different. I said, well, how is it different, John? And he said, well, you see this apple pie next to it? I said, yeah. I'm going to put this apple pie inside the cheesecake. I said, what? You're going to put an apple pie inside a cheesecake? Yes. So, and this is what I like, unique things. And this guy is a character, and it was pretty radical. So he makes his egg batter and pours some of that over this wonderful little crust, if you will, the Goya Maria cookies, and then he drops this apple pie in it. And then he fills the rest of it up with the batter. And I said, well, John, the pie is already cooked, so how are you going to bake this thing? And he said, well, I'm going to put it in the oven. I think it's for like 4.5 or 5 hours at 200 degrees, which is very low. And because he said, I don't want to cook the pie anymore. I just want to cook the batter around it. And then, so he did that. And then about the last 20 minutes, he throws it into the broiler and just kind of browns the top of it, kind of gives it a nice little golden look. Mm-hmm. That comes out of the oven. And then it sits on the counter, ladies and gentlemen, for another 5 hours, something like that. For it to cool, and then it goes in the refrigerator overnight, and then he brings it out. Well, we already had one prepared, and all this was part of the show. And I got to tell you something, it was extraordinary. It was not something I would probably, eat every day, but it was amazing. So his wife, and we called her Vanna. Vanna is cutting into this pie. And it was a small slice. I said, well, John, give us a sense of how many calories you think it might be in this piece of pie. Well, over 1,000. So,
oh my gosh.
But I got to tell you, it was amazing. So that just gives you a couple examples, if you will, of the types of folks that have been in my show. And they're all different. They're all characters. I love it.
And that's so amazing because I saw that episode and I'm going, oh my goodness, how much work is that? But they enjoyed it so much, what they were doing. And then when he finally comes out, you see the layers and you're going, oh my gosh.
Right. I mean, it was amazing. My wife, who was sitting next to me, just passed me a note, and she said, Dummy, you said the show was on tomorrow. Tomorrow's not Sunday. Tomorrow's Saturday. So
right.
Forgive me.
It's on Sunday, 10 o'clock.
But it's on Sunday at 10 o'clock.
At Fox 4.
At Fox 4, right.
And I was very blessed that I met Rob at a vegan event.
Yeah, vegan.
Because I'm trying to learn more and more about, vegan and vegetables in order to help educate my patients, which I don't know. I think there has to be something in the younger age because people don't know or understand the chemistry of food in terms of what is a carbohydrate, what is a protein, what is vegetables. Because many times I'll tell people, especially like diabetics, I'll say, you have to watch sugar. And they don't understand that fruit turns into sugar.
Absolutely, yeah.
They say, well, I never use sugar.
Wine, I mean, people love that glass of wine.
That glass of wine. Yeah. Or people, I had a patient, they said, well, I don't put sugar. I go, well, what did you have for breakfast? 2 Twinkies.
That's not sugar.
So I'm like, and I think that, and I think that people need to learn more. And we try on this show to educate everyone about the different types of carbohydrates and sugar, but
there is so much confusion out there.
There is so much confusion,
and that's what I was saying a little earlier. That I'm actually I started the mission, if you will, to help people, because that's when I found out. I mean, the folks really don't understand, and there were so many people saying, "Oh, I have the best way for you to lose weight," or "This is the secret pill," if you will. And they are bombarded by all these different theories, if you will, if I could say that, and they really don't. They can't separate the truth, if you will, from not necessarily falsehoods, but things that aren't necessarily the right thing for them to do. So
Right.
It's very confusing.
Well, I always talk about, and we have a caller. Hi, caller.
It's your mother again.
Hi, Mommy.
Well, listen.
What's your question, Mom?
Well, you know those Maria cookies by Goya?
Yeah.
They were my mother's favorite crackers.
Oh,
And
crackers.
They're very inexpensive. They come in a tube, and they're about $1 something. I mean, very cheap. And they sell them now. Publix has them, and
Oh, yeah, they're all over.
have
Yeah.
them. Yeah. And Betsy, don't feel discouraged because people don't know about carbohydrates. The young generation don't even know about geography or history. So,
Okay, Mom. This is not a political show. Thank you.
bye-bye.
I love you. Bye-bye.
I love your mom. She's amazing.
Yeah. Because
What a riot.
there are some shows on this channel that are political.
Yeah.
Last week we had a caller wanting to know I go, this is not a political show. It's about your health. It's about life, but not politics. Even though that is part of our life, I don't want to focus on that. So you are telling me, you've told me before, you have other things you've done in your life, which I think are amazing. You had an advertising agency.
Yeah. I guess if you want to start at the beginning, I'm an NYU guy, and I went to the School of Fine Arts in New York, which was in the East Village, which was a great place to be. And I was there from 1967. I'm an old person, folks. From 1967 to 1969. So that was right, if you will, the beginnings of the Vietnam War and all that wonderful stuff. And I went to school with people like Billy Crystal and what have you. And there was, most college kids are very liberal, Democrats and so on and so forth. And there was a society called Students for the Democratic Society, and that was just big on the campus. And that's when women were burning their bras and all that great. So it was just a wonderful time. But I started there, and then after that, I went to CBS and Black Rock, they call it. And I was a news writer for a couple of years. And then I went and I managed one of their television affiliates. It was a CBS affiliate in Rochester, New York, which happened to be owned by, again, not newspapers at the time. And I was there for about 10 years. And then one day, we found out the station was up for sale. The new chairman of the board of Gannett had a dream. His dream was to start a nationwide newspaper. So he actually divested the 7 radio stations and the 7 television stations, used part of that money to create this newspaper called, you ready? USA Today. So that's how that happened.
Oh, my gosh.
So I came home, I told my wife, I said, well, honey, we're going to change careers. And she said, we are? I said, yes. And I said, well, what are you thinking of? I said, I'm going to open my door as an advertising agency. And she said, you're out of your mind. I mean, what do you know about running an advertising agency? Well, what we did, at the time, we had an old farmhouse about 30 miles outside of Rochester in Little Lake, Ontario. Little Lake, Ontario is a big lake. And there was a woodshed behind it, and that's where I started my advertising agency, in a woodshed. And the only thing we had is heat, if you will, was a wood-burning stove. There was no electricity, just a wood-burning stove. And what I did is I'm now called a creative conceptualist. What does that mean? That means I come up with ideas. So what I would do is I would look around and I would kind of seek out an account that I would love to have and know that I could do a better job from a creative point of view. So I would develop a creative concept. And the old proverbial thing is, give me 3 minutes, let me tell you my idea, and if you like it, hire me. If you don't, kick me out of your office. Well, I won about 80% of my accounts that way. The first one was a small little household appliance guy in Mineola, Long Island, which got me to French appliance business, which was Molinet. And then Molinet, I got Hamilton Beach, and I went on and on and on. So at the end, we had amassed quite an impressive list of clients, and we had that agency for almost 20 years.
Wow. And you were talking about some kind of a drink that...
Well, one of the ones that kind of put us on a map in, I think it was 1980, was a soft drink called Jolt, J-O-L-T, Jolt Cola, all the sugar, and twice the caffeine was the slogan. And I'll tell you a real quick story there. The guy who owned it also owned a number of Canada Dry 7-Up bottling plants. And so he went to one of the meetings that they have every year where they introduce new products. And at the time, they were going to roll out with a new product called Mr. Pibb. I don't know if you remember that.
Yes, I remember that.
And Joe,
it was like a root beer-ish.
Yeah, and Joe is a very outspoken guy. He stood up and said, "That is the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life. It's never going to go anywhere." And they all said, "Joe, sit down, sit down, sit down." And he said, "Look, I'm going to prove you wrong." And he did. So, and when he got back, he had different flavors made up. They have flavoring houses, rather. And after about 200 or 300 flavors, they gave him one that he absolutely loved. And he calls me up on the phone. He said, "Rob, you got to come over. I've got the formula, and I'm gonna call it good old-fashioned cola. Good old-fashioned cola." And I said, "Joe, even with all the money you have, you don't have enough money to make that a popular product. You just don't. You're going to be fighting Coke. You're going to be fighting Pepsi. It's not going to happen." He said, "Well, what do you think we should do?" I said, "Let's come up with something really radical." And so his formula had a lot of sugar. It was cane sugar, a real cane sugar, and it had a lot of caffeine in it. And at the time, and Coke and Pepsi have done this over the years, they weaned people off the original formula. So they were all using cane sugar, but it's expensive. They were all using a lot of caffeine. But over the years, they substituted cane sugar with corn syrup and so on. So they wean people off, but insidiously slow. So you really don't know the difference. So Joe was going to come out with all this cane sugar. So anyway, how the product evolved and how we came up with the slogan, all the sugar and twice the caffeine, which was we had all the sugar that Coke and Pepsi did not have, and we had twice the caffeine that Coke and Pepsi didn't have. So the whole idea with that kind of a slogan, and we did this purposely, the can had a big lightning bolt going through it, and it had the slogan, all the sugar and twice the caffeine. We knew that Mom was going to hate this product. Mm-hmm. And that's that was done by design. If Mom hated the product, guess what? The kids were going to love the product. And that's what happened. So it became one of those magical moments in marketing history where we took an unknown product, and it's a long story, I won't get into it, but we made it a worldwide sensation in a matter of 9 months.
Oh, my goodness.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, it's quite a story.
And
by the way, that was a forerunner to the energy drinks today because that was the first energy drink, and we didn't know it at the time.
We've talked about those on the show. How much sugar, which
I'd
is
give
not good
anything for a bottle of that right now. It's the best stuff ever.
Well, the funny thing is that kids would take this in college before they were crashing for an exam or whatever. The truth of the matter is, you'd have to drink 5 Cokes, or 5 Jolts, I should say. That's the Freudian. 5 Jolts to equal the same caffeine level in a cup of coffee. So a lot of it was just your mind was thinking that it's going to blow the top of your head off because it's got all this real cane sugar and all this caffeine. And in reality, it wasn't that potent. But that's marketing for you.
Well, my family's from Cuba. Believe me, I love Cuban coffee. And one of the things they do is they mix the water. They put sugar, real sugar in it. Yeah. And when you go to Miami, you get the little cups.
I love that.
And it tastes so delicious.
Love it.
But now I'm to the point where I drink black coffee, and I like
black
it.
Coffee too.
So I want to talk more about this wonderful show, and I also want to give a wonderful shout out to your beautiful wife, Barbara, who is shy and doesn't want to speak, but I can see the chemistry between the two of you. You work together. It's beautiful.
Well, she's my partner.
As I know,
she's my partner.
It's beautiful. I love it. I love to see that. To me, it's very, just beautiful. Anyways, so about your show, there's a segment, and talk to us. How did you come up with that segment where it's the hidden gems?
Right. Okay. This is part of our show, as I mentioned earlier, is we have cooks on, but I also wanted to kind of salt and pepper that show with other things that just would kind of take the viewer away into a different area for maybe 2 or 3 minutes. So one of those is called Rob and Ruth's Hidden Gems. And what that is that Ruth is Ruth Manchester. She's Chef Ruth Manchester, very renowned. She was voted by her peers 3 years ago as top chef in America. She had a wonderful restaurant in Brewster, Massachusetts on Cape Cod Bay with her husband, Cliff. And I think they had it for 33, 34 years. And it was just so well known. It was amazing. And she knew Julia Child, and she's worked with a lot of top chefs and so on and so forth. It's just amazing. So I'm so pleased to have her as my partner, if you will, in this segment of the show. So what we'll do is we'll go to places like, let's say we go to a Publix supermarket, and we'll go into the produce department, and they may have some vegetables that seem sort of strange to folks. They don't know exactly what it is. Well, Ruth would be able to tell us that. And what we would do is we would buy that vegetable, in this case, take it back to my outdoor kitchen, and we'd prepare something with that vegetable. So that's the essence of the show. And it's a lot of fun, and we're just starting to shoot some of these segments. Our first one is going to be in, we're going to, what's the name of the place we're going to? Do you remember? Yeah, Everglades City. Everglades City.
Oh, the one that got decimated by Hurricane Irma.
Yeah, well, Everglades City has got a seafood fest coming up. Mm-hmm. So that'll be the first thing that Ruth and I will be going to is that, and tasting a lot of the seafood fairs, if you will, and so on. So that's a fun segment. Yeah, and I have another one called Rob's Food Tips, which is sort of a food demonstration thing where my wife will come up with all these wonderful things that I can do to save people time. Like, for example, if you have a bunch of little cherry tomatoes and you have to cut them all in half, well, you take 2 plastic lids, you put the cherry tomatoes in between it, and you slide your knife in between the 2 plastic lids, and now all of a sudden you've got, halved, if you will, cherry tomatoes in a matter of seconds. So she comes up with all these little ideas, and that's part of Rob's Food Tips.
Well, I saw you did one where you turn the vegetable,
the spiralizer.
The spiralizer.
Yeah.
But also the segment with Chef Ruth, she made
seafood,
and the way she plated it looked like a fish.
Her seafood curry was insane.
Yes, that's what it was.
Seafood curry. And we still get people who are writing in about that. And, can we see more of Ruth? And we have all the recipes, so people can download the recipes, and all that is archived on our website.
Which is at greatneighborhoodcooks.com.
Exactly, yeah.
Which is really wonderful because you can look at the shows, you can get the recipes, and then you have a segment where you have what do they call those? Outtakes?
Oh, outtakes, yeah. Well, my director, who's an amazing guy, his name is Tanchi. He's from Bolivia. And Tanchi is so well known in his home country. He used to be a newscaster. So I call him the Walter Cronkite of Bolivia. But anytime when he goes back home, they kind of mob him at the airport. He's very beloved. But he is a great director. And at the end of all of our shows, he does these funny little outtakes. And so we also have those archived on the website so people can go and see those. And it's kind of like a little fun relievement, if you will. Yeah.
This has been wonderful. Let's take a quick break. We got more to come.